Welcome to Equestrian Fitness for the Long Ride with the Sweaty Equestrian. I'm personal trainer and endurance rider Tamara Basinger, and I'm here to help you ride stronger in a day and longer in your life. Hello. Welcome back to the podcast. If you are new here, welcome. I'm so glad to have you listening. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode. Normally, we talk about things related to rider fitness, rider health, but I'm also an endurance rider as my primary equestrian sport, and I did my horse Kokopelli's first endurance ride last weekend. As I record this, it'll actually be 2 weekends ago by the time it publishes. But I kind of just wanted to share his story of this first ride. I know that some of you are fairly new endurance riders, which means you probably are bringing new horses into the sport along with you. So hopefully in this story, you will find some interesting little bits and pieces that you can apply to make your own experience better. And if you are an experienced endurance rider, just come along for the ride, the happy memories, the scary memories, the things that we all have experienced out there on the trail. So saddle up and here we go to the City of Rocks endurance ride. This is a ride that takes place in I think it's a national preserve. I'm not sure. It's a scenic spot down near the Idaho-Utah border, and we camp in a ride camp that's on private land just outside the park, and then we ride up into the park, and it has a lot of different kinds of users there. You've got families camping, you have climbers on the cool rock formations, mountain bikers, so lots of different things to expose the horses to, but also cool things to look at all day long, very scenic spots. So I was excited to go down to this ride, which I've done a number of times before, but not with Kokopelli because he is brand new to the sport. You might recall that he did a limited distance ride, a 25-miler, kind of on our local trails about a month ago, but it's just not the same as packing him up in the LQ trailer and hauling him across the state. It's about a 4 to 5 hour drive from here when you're towing. And we had a pretty good experience. The whole goal was for him to have a good, relaxed, positive, keep the marbles in the right holes type of experience. So Mr. Sweaty came along, which was great because then I don't have to manage all the little things like setting up the trailer. He even drives and helps me out with food and things. So I was able to really just focus on my horse. And then also I was riding with a good friend, Sister Sweaty, who is not my actual sister, but close enough. On her first-time horse as well. Now, I don't know that I would typically pair two first-time horses together. Ideally, we would go with an older, experienced, steady Eddie type of horse. But in this case, both of our boys, even though they're only 5, are pretty chill personalities. And they've also gone out together a lot. So we thought, what the heck, we'll give this a try. We're not in a hurry. We're going to get our money's worth, spend the whole day out there if we need to, and just take what comes, make it a good experience for everybody, hopefully. But you never know because horses be horses. So Mr. Sweaty and I actually headed to camp the day before Sister Sweaty brought her load of horses down. So we were set up in camp for a while with Kokopelli being on his own. And I had him in a panel pen. These are kind of lightweight but full-size panels. And it was about, it's a 12 by 24 pen. And he was pretty good in there. There were other horses around, but nobody he knew, and they weren't super close. The one that happened to be closest to us was kind of a nervous mare, which I don't know if her being nervous really made a big difference to my horse, but it certainly did make a difference to him when she was led away or when other horses went by because people were out doing little pre-rides or trail riding or whatever. Just seeing horses come and go did mess with Coco's mind a little bit. I expected that, and I was kind of anticipating I would have to do some training because I don't want it to become a habit for him to flip out in camp and be pacing the fence and making dust and hollering and driving everybody, especially me, nuts and potentially putting himself at risk. So I kind of had to draw a line somewhere. I didn't want to be constantly decision making. Do I do something about his behavior now? How about now? How about now? So I was okay with him walking the fence. If he wanted to pace a little bit at a walk, not frantic, but be moving his body, okay. But when he started to trot in his pen or stick his nose up in the air in that impatient, anxious way and look a little bit frantic, that was my line. That was when I was going to do something about it. So what I started doing was when he would cross that line, I'd go in and give him something to do with his mind. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't making him work per se, but it was, okay, we're going to bend, we're going to yield the hindquarters, we're going to yield the forequarters. Or if he was really building up energy, maybe sometimes we would go outside the pen and do some, I don't want to say lunging, but groundwork on a 14-foot line where he had to move his feet, but we weren't just trying to burn energy. The whole point was to get him listening again. So we were doing lots of reversals, either by yielding the hindquarters or the forequarters and him having to pay attention to which I was asking for. All things that I had built into him ahead of time at home so that I could use them as tools in the toolkit when we got to this situation. So depending on how worked up he was, we did maybe higher or lower energy things. But the point was to do familiar groundwork that brought him back to thinking instead of just being emotional. And then as soon as I had him calmed down, focused, relaxed, I'd let him loose in his paddock again and see what he did. Sometimes he went right back to pacing, and so we went right back to work. Other times he would relax and go eat, and it would take him a while to, for another horse to go by or whatever, for him to get distracted again, start getting upset, and then we would go back to doing some kind of groundwork. This is not a ton of fun for me. It's hard to relax and just, sit there and hydrate and get my tack ready or whatever while I'm constantly having to watch and train. But it was nice to be there a whole day early. Like I wasn't going to ride the next day. I was going to have time to do all these other things, but also focus on the training and just let it be what it was. So I was relatively pleased that he seemed like he was going to be trainable. Was he perfect? No, but he also wasn't completely frantic and out of control and not coming back to me. So he's young. We'll see. It was the first experience. And thank goodness for me, because it was kind of a pain. We did not have to do this all the way through the next day because Sister Sweaty showed up before lunchtime on Friday and set up next to us. And then he was surrounded by his buddies and we had no further issues. So let's see what else might be interesting for you to know. The night before went smoothly. We vetted in. I had practiced vetting with Coco before, like run him through all the things as though I were the vet. Certainly taught him to trot out. We did a lot of trotting out in hand first. And that went very smoothly. His heart rate was only 40 when we vetted in, even though there were other horses. It was kind of chaotic in the area at the time. So I was really pleased with that. He doesn't generally get super caught up in the emotion of the moment. And that's one of the things I like about him. It's also one of the things that helped me sleep pretty well the night before the ride. I wasn't nearly as nervous to ride him on his first ride as I have been to ride some other horses on their first rides. Maybe it helps that he's non-Arab, although some Arabs can be pretty chill as well. But sure enough, on the morning of the ride, he ate well. I wasn't particularly concerned about how much he was going to eat because all his all his nutrition and fuel was really already on board from the prior few days. But it's always nice when they do ride or eat the morning of the ride, because then I can tell, he's relaxed enough to be interested in food, and I can get some alfalfa in him for that calcium, for the stomach buffering effect, because nobody wants ulcers. So I was happy with that. He stayed calm while I saddled him up. He kept eating right up until the start. We led the horses over together, Sister Sweaty and Titan and me and Cocopelli, and we watched the start. We did a little walk down the road for a warm-up, but then we just kind of hung out and let the horses go, which I wouldn't suggest for a horse that is winding up emotionally. If they had been doing that, I would have put them to work, and gotten their brains focused, but they really were taking the experience pretty calmly. So we let all the other horses go while we were there in the starting area, and our horses were not getting particularly worked up. And when everybody else had gone, we hopped on and we walked out on a loose rein, which was a bit unusual and also quite lovely. And really, we did not have any trouble. The horses didn't get racy. They didn't start fighting. When we did get off some kind of rocky footing that was hidden under that puffy dirt, where you can't see the rocks. Once we got through that near the start, we picked up a trot and off we went. And we really didn't have any fights over pace. I don't recall having to hold Coco in at all. And Sister Sweaty was having the same experience with Titan. So it was great. Now, we did realize partway through that first loop that, the LD riders who are on the 25 milers are going to be coming up behind us. And of course, the front runners in the LD are going to be coming up fast. And so for a while, we were nervous that they were going to run up on us, because not only had we left late, but we weren't going particularly fast. But they never showed up, and we even at some point had a conversation about, are we on the right trail? Did we take the right loop? We did, didn't we? Because shouldn't they be coming up behind us? Well, finally we realized that they weren't actually supposed to start and come up the trail behind us. They had gone a different way, even though much of their loop was shared. So we finally figured that out, but for a while we were a little concerned that would happen. I mention that because these are the things you need to be thinking about when you have a new horse out there on the trail. You just have to be situation aware and know what could happen. Try not to let it affect your confidence, but, be aware that somebody may come charging up behind you, which is not good trail etiquette, by the way, but it does happen from time to time. And by the way, if you are taking this in and you're feeling like, oh, this is a lot. My first ride is coming up and I'm nervous about this sort of thing. I don't know what the trail etiquette is. I don't know what to do when I get to camp. Do I just park anywhere? Do I have to ask? What do I do first? Do I take care of my horse? Do I need to go register? When I go to the ride meeting the night before, what do I listen for? It's a lot of information. What matters? What should I be doing at the start? Is it okay to start late? How do I vet in again? What should I pack in my saddlebags? If you have all those kinds of questions, I do have an ebook out there that's a quick, friendly read that is not like your typical more traditional how-to endurance ride books. There are some really, really good ones out there. My favorite is by Dr. Nancy Loving, who is an endurance riding vet and rider. She rides and she vets. And her book is called Go the Distance. It's the one that I read when I first started endurance riding 20 years ago. So while the photos in the book are a bit dated because it is an older book, the horse's physiology has not changed. Most of the rules of the sport have not changed. So it's still valid information and a great book if you're looking for things like, what do I feed an endurance horse? How do I condition my endurance horse? Those kinds of things are out there in books, but My ebook is called The Sweaty Equestrian's Guide to Your First Endurance Ride, and it is intended to get more at those anxiety-inducing human questions that nobody thinks to answer for you. If you are going by yourself to your first ride like I did, and you don't have a mentor who is taking you through the process, this guide is intended to be your mentor, to tell you what to do before you even load up the horse, remind you to get your paperwork together and what you're going to need. And then what do you do when you get in ride camp? What should you be doing the evening before the ride to make sure that you're ready for the next day? What do you do on ride morning? How early should you get up? When should you tack up? All these kinds of questions are what I talk about in The Sweaty Equestrian's Guide to Your First Endurance Ride. It also comes with other things like my endurance ride packing list, so you know what to bring, and what I call an ice pack, which is ICE in case of emergency, that you can fill out either by hand or it's a fillable PDF and it'll auto-populate, so you only have to type things once, and then you'll have little placards that you can carry on yourself and put in your saddlebag so it's with your horse, and post in your truck and in your trailer so that people know who to contact if someone does go wrong. There's also an endurance ride food guide in there. Anyway, it's this package of information that is really useful if you're going to your first or one of your first endurance rides and you want kind of a mentor in your pocket. So if that is something that sounds like it would be helpful for you, you can find it at thesweatyequestrian.com/endurance ride guide. Anyway, back to our story. So we're out here on the first loop. We are doing well. The horses are calm. They're drinking. We're not really having any problems, except that we're wondering if the LDs are going to come up behind us. And then we cross a creek. Now, Coco does not have issues with crossing water or mud. He's normally fine. And he didn't have trouble at this spot either, except that he just kind of moved sideways in a way that pushed us into this dead tree snag that was hanging out over the trail a little bit. And it was right at the level of my stirrup. And somehow I managed to get my lower leg and stirrup tangled up in this dead snag. And it was big enough that it wasn't just going to break. So this was suddenly a very dangerous situation, because if Coco kept going forward, I was going to be left behind with some part of my leg and some part of my stirrup tangled in this tree. And of course, that was going to move the tree, spook the horse. And if he bolted out from under me, I could be looking at a spiral fracture, or it was one of those things that just had the potential to escalate so fast. And it happened in a matter of seconds. He just moved over. Suddenly we're tangled in this snag. So I asked him to stop. And as he did that, he stepped kind of closer into the snag, and now it's pressing into his flank. And he's shaking, but he's holding. And Sister Sweaty is behind me, untighten. They're holding up, and I say, I'm caught. And she can see this. I asked Coco to back up just a hair, and I lifted my caught leg up. I was going to see if I could dismount so that I wasn't going to get hurt, even if the stirrup was still caught. But then my friend said, you're loose. Okay, so in lifting my legs, somehow I had gotten loose. So there I am, kind of sideways on the horse with my knee on the tree side, really bent, and my foot up almost on his back. And I was like, okay, Coco, move forward. And he did, and he walked forward calmly. He was still shaking, but he walked forward out of the situation, and I was just so proud and so relieved. Adrenaline was up a bit. But nothing happened. Nothing happened. He was solid. He did what I asked, even though he was scared. He held, and that is the kind of brain that is lovely to have in an endurance horse. So super proud of him for that moment. So off we went down the trail around the loop, and then we did get to the point where we were sharing trail with the limited distance riders and also all the 50s that were ahead of us, because it went out away from a spot close to camp into a lollipop through a scenic area, and then back on shared trails. So as we, the slower riders, were going out, the LDs and the faster 50s were coming back toward us on this long stretch of gravel road that headed out to this other park that's right next to the City of Rocks. It's called Castle Rocks. Well, Kokopelli and Titan were not super stoked on this idea of, okay, now you're asking us to go away from camp because, by the way, dummies, we know where it is and it's behind us. And also, they've got horses coming at them fast because it was a wide trail and most people didn't slow down, which was fine. It wasn't like we were coming head to head on a narrow stretch. It was this big, wide road. But they're coming fast at us, fast trot, canter, and going the other way back toward camp. So Coco and Titan tried to stage a protest. They really, 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 really thought we were dumb for not taking them back toward camp. But everyone survived. It was fine. Nobody threw a major fit. They just were very reluctant to carry on until finally we got out on that lollipop part. And because we were in the back, we no longer saw any horses coming our direction. So that was kind of a relief by that point because we were getting tired of pushing them. So we went around this scenic loop, and I had been a little bit nervous about it because I have ridden this trail before, and there is a section where it's steep downhill and rocky with some big flat rocks and then some big rolly rocks in it. And usually there's a creek running through that, so it's slick on top of everything else. Now, Coco is a really good downhill horse, and he's sure-footed, but it's still kind of a sketchy situation, and I wasn't looking forward to it. But this year, we've had an unusually dry year, which is not good in a lot of ways, but it was handy on this particular stretch of trail because I recognized it. It just wasn't wet this year. It was a pretty dry stretch with just a little mud at the bottom. So that was kind of nice, made that part easier. So we finished that lollipop section and went back down that long road into camp and into the hold. So there was a lot of concussion for the horses trotting on this long stretch of road. And then also we had to go back through the stretch near camp where there were those rolly rocks hidden under the puffy dirt. And the horses just kind of kept tripping over them because you couldn't see them. And we finally just slowed down and walked in more than we ordinarily would have. And Coco's heart rate was already down to criteria, which was 60 beats per minute when we got there right away. But Titan's was at 64, and it kind of hung there, which perhaps was explained when we got to the vet after he came down to 60. And the vet thought, Titan maybe looks a little inconsistently off. Is he off? They had him trot again for the other vet, and agreed that he's off, but it's not consistent. It almost seems to be maybe both front legs. So because it wasn't a sure thing, either way, they said, go back, do your hold, and bring him back, and we'll do a recheck before you go back out on the trail or get pulled. We'll decide at that point. So that's never what you want to hear, but you do what you can. We went back to the trailers and we took care of both horses as if they were both going on. At first, Coco was interested in eating his beet pulp mash with electrolytes in it. Yay! But then he tapered off and wasn't having that anymore. So I did end up syringing him with electrolytes, which I was really glad that I had practiced a lot with something good, usually just apple juice before, because when I got him last fall, he was super anti-syringe. No, not having it. Like he would back across the arena to avoid the syringe. So I was really glad that I had done a lot of training ahead of time with the syringe so that I could electrolyte him in peace. Even though he didn't love it, he was fine. So we went back for the recheck and boom, Titan was okay. So we got back on, we walked out calmly again. By the way, it was very windy all day. It was blustery, lots of gusts coming through. So it was nice to have the horses be calm, even though it was super windy. And little did they know they had another 25-mile loop to go. And it started on a little stretch of pavement. And we thought, well, if Titan is a little off, this is going to be where we notice it. So we trotted on that a bit. And he was fine. He was fine. So we decided, you know what? We're just not going to stress about it. We're going to go do our loop. If he does come up lame, we will definitely notice and we can do something about it then. But he seems to be totally fine. So let's just go have a good time. And we did. The horses, who had never done anything like this before, who had never been out on a second 25-mile-an-hour loop before, had questions. They got about 8 or 10 miles out there and we're like, okay, we would really rather eat. We would really rather not move forward. Can we just have this grass and not be trotting along for more and more miles? And mind you, we're still going away from camp because this is a 25-mile loop. So we did have to push them some. Of course, we let them eat. Eating on the trail is great, but standing there and eating on the trail for hours like they would have liked to is not so great. So we had to strike this balance between, yes, letting them eat, but you got to grab and go, dudes, because we're never going to get there if we don't move out. And it was the kind of terrain where we'd get them pushed up into a trot and then it would be rocky and we'd have to walk again. And so the first part of that loop was kind of slow and we kind of had to push the young horses through it. They were fine. Physically, they were totally fine, but mentally they had questions. So we finally got up to the top point of the trail at the high point of the park in a beautiful place called Indian Grove, where there's a spring-fed trough and it's very pretty and scenic, and it would have been lovely just to stop there and have a nap, except that it was even more windy up there on top. So pretty quickly, we started back down toward camp. Yay, the horses sped up. They were more excited now. They knew they were headed back toward camp, even though they still had, 13-ish miles to go on the way there. And this was a quite technical bit of trail headed back down until we got down more into the main part of the park, down from Indian Grove. These are trails that I remember on, my first time at City of Rocks would have been, 10 or 15, probably more like 15 years ago. And relatively early in my endurance career. I've been doing this for, I think my first ride was in 2006. So about 20 years. And at the time, these were the first, or the most technical trails I had ever ridden. And I remember getting off and leading my horse down and being amazed that some of these riders were riding down this crazy, rocky, rooted trail down these steep hills and around these steep bends. And now it was just like, shrug, cool, easy, especially on Kokopelli because he is such a good technical and downhill horse. So I was really proud of how he handled that. And the horses did pick up the energy heading back, and boy, nothing really exciting happened on the way back into camp. It was just a nice, pleasant, easy ride, which is exactly the way we like it. And we ended, our ride time, I think, was about, is it our ride time or our total time? I can't remember. We finished in about 10 hours, and there was an hour hold in there. I think we finished around 5:30. So that would make our ride time about, 9.5 hours? Because we had a 7 a.m. start. So that was not fast by any means, but we had not intended to go fast. We really just wanted the horses to have a good experience, finish tired but not exhausted, have calm minds the whole day. We wanted to, there are lots of gates on this ride, so we wanted to mount up after getting the gates and not have the horses taking off out from under us, but rather stand until we said go. All these little things that will just make life so much easier over a long endurance career instead of setting them up for a lifetime of these little battles over and over. And so we did that. That was exactly how the day went. It really couldn't have been any better. And to top things off, Coco finished with all A's on his vet card, every single thing. And we got to go to the hot spring afterwards because there is a developed hot spring right outside the City of Rocks, and it's within 3 miles of ride camp. So we hopped in a car and drove down there after the horses were taken care of, soaked in the hot spring, and then had a lovely night's sleep. and packed up pretty casually the next morning, had a little extra coffee, and drove home the next day. I turned Coco out in the pasture with his buddy, and they went running off looking super happy and great, not footsore. I'm sure he was a little bit muscle sore, but really he looked fantastic and has continued to look fantastic. So yay, that was Coco Pelle's first endurance ride. It was about as good of an experience as it could possibly have been. So if I can help you have that good of an experience too, again, go to thesweatyequestrian.com/endurance ride guide and pick up my ebook and that packet of other helpful materials like the packing list and other things that go with it. And hopefully that'll be a great resource for you. And also remember that if your own fitness is in question and you know that your horse can do this, but you're not sure that you can, that is the main thing I do at the Sweaty Equestrian. We focus on rider fitness for endurance or any other discipline. So swing by the website, make sure you're on my newsletter because you can get content there, kind of like a private blog post every week that you can't get anywhere else. So let me know how I can help you ride stronger in a day and longer in your life. Want to get more sweaty? Subscribe to my newsletter at thesweatyequestrian.com/newsletter. And remember, you have what it takes to be a full athletic partner for your horse. Saddle up strong.